Welcome to another episode of the Kinvestor Report, where we sit down with industry experts to discuss the latest developments in the Canadian small cap sector. I'm your host, Arlen Hansen. Standard disclaimer, no part of this interview should be construed as investment advice. And as I don't know what stocks we're talking about today, Kin may own shares or be compensated by the companies that we discuss in today's interview. Today, I'm joined by David Morgan, a widely recognized analyst in the precious metals industry and consults for hedge funds, high net worth individuals, mining companies, and bullion dealers. He's the publisher of the Morgan Report, a world-class publication designed to build and secure your wealth. David, honored to have you on the show today. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, I think this is a very timely discussion, as I believe the fundamentals support the immediate need to protect our wealth, obviously due to the upcoming financial collapse that is staring at us in the face. And I think you and I both agree on that. So let's tackle some of these important considerations. When we look at the mountain of debt the U.S. keeps piling on, the cost of borrowing, while continuing to spend incomprehensible amounts of money on policies and wars that just takes money out of the pocket of Americans, how do you see this unfolding?
Well, I see it unfolding as probably the greatest financial debacle in all of recorded history. And I'm weighting my words very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And let me give you some foundation for that statement. In all other financial collapses, other than perhaps the Roman Empire, or even in the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire failed, but the Eastern Roman Empire actually continued. So you could say that half the world failed. But coming back on point, in all other cases, it's been a unique situation, meaning it's Argentina or it's Venezuela or it's the Weimar Republic. So if you're in the Weimar Republic, which is the one that posts people that don't have the foundation that I have in monetary history, know vaguely that it went from a society of a very good society to a hyperinflation. And how did it go from, a sound financial system to an unsound one? Well, that's a unique case, but now it's a worldwide phenomenon. Why? Because the dollar, the US dollar, is the reserve currency of the world. So if the world's currency fails, by logic, then the world fails. Now, what's happened in the last decade or so is there's been things that have come up, which is a free market idea. In other words, how do I protect myself from what's going to happen? Well, the BRICS is one, right? The other one is cryptocurrency. And of course, we've got the stalwarts, which no one really pays attention to unless they are able to think outside the box and get to the alternative media, because the mainstream financial press is never going to tell you that the only thing that survived the Weimar Republic was gold and silver. They're never going to tell you that the only thing that survived in Zimbabwe was gold and silver. They're never going to tell you that the only thing that survived in Argentina was gold and silver. They're never going to tell you that the only thing that solved the problem for people at large in Venezuela was gold and silver. They're not going to tell you that. Mm-hmm. They're going to tell you that this tech stock's selling for 100 times earnings has only got a brighter future ahead.
Of course.
So we are in not only the disinformation age, the overinformation age, but we're in a propaganda press that's never had so much power before, because the psychological ability to actually bend your mind has got to such a high level that we're in a social media paradigm where people actually think they're coming up with their own thoughts when actually they've been programmed. And I know those are hard statements, but I'm getting more and more fed up the older I get, because I don't see a lot of time left for people like you. And I want to put as much fire into your belly as I possibly can, because I need to continue the message. It's not about me or my ego, believe me, it's about the message. But unless I could get people like you fired up even beyond where you are now, I don't think we have a whole lot of I don't think we have a big chance. I think we win in the long run, but I want to mitigate the problem as early as possible. In other words, if you win the first 3 battles in a war and you're outnumbered 10-1, that those 3 battles are going to be much more purposeful than the war goes on for 5 or 6 years and then finally you start winning. Follow my logic. Back to you, and thanks for the interview.
Yeah. Well, that totally leads into my next question. Like, do you think there is any way out of this except to crash and burn and rebuild?
Yes and no. I know I just contradicted myself, but I would lean 80%. that we have to crash and burn. I'm still optimistic. 20% is one in five. I mean, we could take the bankers out day after tomorrow if everyone in the United States bought 2 ounces of silver.
Yeah.
And silver is much more critical to the economic system than gold ever will be.
I want to
get technological age. If you don't have silver, you don't have a computer, you don't have a TV set, you don't have a membrane switch, you don't have a computer keyboard, you don't have a laptop, you don't have a cell phone.
Yeah.
So you've got to be in a situation where if we controlled something as critical as oil, which the masses would have a hard time controlling, but silver, it could be achieved, or at least in theory, it could be achieved. Now, I know that sounds really, really radical, and I know it's an idea the idea is sound. It's how do you implement it?
Well, I don't think these generations that have grown up over the last 30 years could even wrap their heads around that. They just would have, they wouldn't understand at all.
Right. Let me interject. And that's a great thought. I'm sorry. I don't like to interrupt, but we're on the same wavelength today, and I'm really fired up because they've been mind bent. They've been programmed. If they could really think freely and learn logic in school and learn critical thinking in school, then my statement, well, at least they would be able to ponder it and come to their own conclusion.
Yeah.
But they're so mind warped that they throw it out.
Yeah, 100%. That's actually it leads again into, I'm fired up on this conversation because I think we see things exactly. And I totally understand that programming. The analogies of what's going on here are very predictable in my opinion. Like the government knows what is going on, knows there's no real way out of it, in my opinion, but continues to lie to manipulate people and trying to spin everything in a positive way. Right. Like at what point do you think people say enough is enough and revolt? And what does that look like? Like, how do the people create the change?
Very good question. I'm going to digress because I really love, having an engineering background and working in the aircraft industry at a fairly high level. And engineering is, it's no BS. Either the freaking motor works or it doesn't. I mean, there's a lot of little crap in the engineering world. And it's basically logically bent. And yeah, most engineers are nerds. But so how does it look like? Well, I did an interview with Arthur in Canada, who's been arrested several times and stood up for religious freedom and all this. And how does that tie in with what you said? Well, the question was, where does it have to go? And I said, well, what happened in Poland before the people finally got fed up enough? I actually expected the answer to be, someone like you fired the people up enough and they got solidarity and they said enough was enough and they basically, changed it. That's not what happened. What he told me was that they got so destitute. They had so little to live for. They're basically, my words, not his, on the edge of starving to death, that they had nothing to lose. And that's when the revolt started. And that, of course, really upset my stomach, to be honest with you, because I don't want to see us have to, we have to hit bottom. Where is that bottom? Is it a high bottom or a low bottom? I don't know. Hopefully it's a high bottom where we not starving out, 20% of the world. But we're on that trend, whether you believe it or not. I know you probably believe me, but your viewers may say, boy, this old man is a radical SOB. And I am.
If they're not watching this channel, or if they disagree with what we're saying, then they most likely aren't even watching my channel. So it's all good, David. So we have all sorts of wars going on in this world, right? Religious wars, class wars, race wars, ideological wars, currency wars, resource wars, energy transition wars. How closely tied are they to each other? And how closely tied are gold and silver and these assets that can back these things? How does this all play together, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I can answer that. This is my take. So it's David's opinion, but remember, it's a studied and experienced opinion.
Yeah.
Everything starts with energy. The world runs on energy, not on finance and money. So even though most people would expect I'd say money, that's not the truth. The truth is it's energy. So without energy, nothing happened. So let's do a thought experiment real quick and just say, wait a minute. Let's say that Tesla was right, or at least a lot of people have the conjecture that Tesla was going to give us free energy. What kind of a planet would we have if everybody had all the energy that they needed? I mean, you could make the deserts bloom because you had enough energy to dig a well deep enough or desalinize water without worrying about the economics of it, right? Because it's uneconomic to take salt water and turn it into pure water. It can be done, but it costs too much. But let's say if we had all the energy we needed, you could do things that are too costly because it's really the energy's cost per barrel of oil, whatever, that would make it prohibitive.
Right.
So if you're looking at, the price of oil at, $100, and it's not, it's in the 80s or so last time I checked, then I do follow fairly closely. And a barrel of oil is something like, I forget the number, maybe much bigger than this. It's like 500,000 man hours. I mean, that's the amount of, labor. I mean, you can't get, I remember doing the math on it. It was something like, it'd be working for like 0.03 cents an hour. I mean, that's the amount of energy you get when you spend $80 for a barrel of oil. Right. So this huge energy that wasn't free, but it was darn cheap when you compare it to human labor, that was able to give what? Huge increase in the population, all the doodads and gadgets and automobiles and trains and planes and all that. So really, when we go back into history, if we aren't able to transition out of oil into something else, and green energy is not it, I'm on the record saying that many times, that we will have in the history books looking back to the age of oil. And that age of oil will go from roughly 1900 to 2050 or something. And anyway, so I haven't fully answered your question. So how does it fit? It fits from energy first. And now what do you do to distribute the energy? Well, the distribution program is based on the petrodollar. That's when we were in a situation where the trust was starting to break down from 1971, August 15th, when Nixon closed the gold window. And at that time, who had the biggest source of energy or oil? And that would be the Middle East. And the Middle East was saying, we don't trust you SOBs because you closed the gold window and you're printing this stuff too fast. And the reason that we know it is you printed so much more than you had gold to back it up. Somebody called your bluff. And it was basically France and the UK. So now Saudi's saying, give us gold, basically. Now, this is reading between the lines. I know this to be a fact, but I can't prove it. But the logic is there. If you follow my logic, I think you'll follow, everyone can see what I'm saying. So what happened was, U.S. says, well, we already closed the gold window, and we need oil, and we certainly aren't going to pay gold for it. So they sent Kissinger over there, and he made a big deal. And the big deal is called the petrodollar. And what he said is, we're the mafia. This is my words, because I'm really on fire today. Yep. Hey, we're the mafia. We got the biggest army on the planet. We'll protect you, and we'll protect your racket, Saudi family, because they certainly don't represent the people. If you don't know that, figure it out. And so we'll do a protection program, and now all you have to do is use the dollar, and we'll protect you. Oh, okay. We'll start using the dollar. Forget gold. Now what happens? Well, now you could print as much currency as you want for a very long time, because what do the Saudis do with all that printed money? Well, they buy 3 jets and 7 cars and another castle or whatever. But there's so much, quote unquote, money, they recycled it. Yeah. They bought treasury bonds. So they put dollars into more dollars, and then they got more dollars and put them into more dollars. They took the cash and bought T-bills, T-notes, and T-bonds over and over and over again. So that became the new gold in a way. And everybody thought, well, and this has gone for a long time, unless you study monetary history, that there's nothing safer than a U.S. bond. Well, this is hogwash.
Is it really safe now?
All our history. If the dollar's going to fail, you think a 10-year dollar won't fail, or a 20-year dollar won't fail, or a 30-year dollar won't fail? And this is what's waking up. You asked me earlier, what's it going to take? And it's that the financial system knows, and you said it as well. They know. The bankers know. High finance knows. High brokers know. a lot of sophisticated investors know. And where do you go? And where do you go is you have enough food to eat to get to the other side. I'm not being facetious. That's really true. And I hate to say it, but I backing up my statement earlier, that God, I hope no one starves on the planet. But the way we're going, the trend that's in place, I would guess up to 20% could, because the way the system is broken down so far without it breaking down further. Let's just say that everything got righted tomorrow. Free energy comes to everyone, and then we can rebuild. There'd be this lag effect of where, certain parts of the world wouldn't be able to feed their population enough to get enough workers to work through. If I'm making sense to you, I hope I am. It's just, you can't instantly turn the ship around. It's called momentum. That's mass times velocity. Excuse my engineering background, but you got a lot of weight at a certain speed. That thing wants to keep going the exact same direction it has, and you turn the wheel and it ignores you for a long time because there's so much momentum. But it will turn.
Yeah,
but it's not like a race car.
Yeah. So now we've talked about the end of the world together, for the lack of better words. How do you protect yourself from this fallout? And obviously, we know you're the silver bug.
Yeah.
And so, is that what you see? The answer is silver and gold.
Well, much more before you get there, because I think to get there, you've got to have some conviction that silver and gold is going to help you. It may not solve the problem, but it'll help mitigate the problem. So I would approach it from an education standpoint. So people like you that are willing to come out, Arlen, and say, look, here's what's really going on. Prove my map wrong. Oh, it's a different map than what you see from the propaganda press. Yeah, it is. But at least take a look. And they take a look and they say, you know what? He's right. I've never seen that like it before. Start to shift this, what I'll call brainwashing, into the mind opening up, because we all have a great deal more capability than we're even able to express. I mean, the best of us use about 10% of our mental facilities. And that's like, wow. So what are that other 90%? I'm sorry, I digress. But the idea is that you've opened up their minds. That's what you've done with your program. Now, where do you go? You educate yourself. Well, what happened in the Republic, and why did gold and silver survive? I gave a pretty good outline at the beginning. I won't repeat it. But what I want people to do is to be shaken up enough, to wake up enough, to open up their minds enough, to educate themselves enough to say, you know what? I have very little problem with doing the first thing, getting more food, paying off debt, and living within my means. And now that I've been able to save and reorient my budget or my idea about money, I will save some in silver and gold. Why? Because it's the only asset that isn't someone else's liability. A T-bill or a T-bond is a liability that's based on the taxpayer of the United States. And they're broke. So if they're broke, the system's broke. So should I put my money in T-bills? And I tell a lot of my people, go ahead, put it on the short end of the curve and get 3-6 month T-bills. Don't go out in the long bond. Don't go out on the 10-year. The chances of the United States defaulting on the debt I'm going to contradict myself again. It's absolutely going to happen, but it's not going to happen in the way of they say we can't pay this. And right. They're going to print until the currency fails. That's the most likely scenario.
Yeah. Well, what I thought was interesting was the news last night about the Treasury auction last night.
Right.
No one was hitting the bid.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. So
that's why I'm so happy we're doing this interview today.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's a big red flag. It's like waving. It's saying, look, the game is over. It's like any sports analogy. And I'm a huge football fan. I'm not a big fight fan, although I've watched some. And but it'd be like going to the first round. No, let's say more like being in maybe, what do we do? 12 rounds in boxing, 15, I forget, but it's probably more like the 9th or 10th round. And it's looked pretty good, pretty even so far. And all of a sudden you just get smashed and you hit the mat. You barely get up on count of 9. Yeah. It's that kind of a hit. It would be my analogy, because all of a sudden everybody at the fight sees that guy got knocked down and barely got back up. That's the US dollar. That's the stalwart. That's the bond. That's the debt market. That's the financial power that the United States has had for so long, and now it just hit the mat and barely got up. That's my analogy. I hope that one makes sense.
Totally. I loved that comment, and I never really occurred to me that all these T-bills and bonds are somebody else's liability. So you're still relying on someone else to pay you back. That's
Exactly.
great. Like that, and I've never thought about that. So yeah, thank you for that. I love learning. So when we're looking at silver and gold, do you look at them as the same thing, or do you see different fundamentals for the silver market versus the gold market?
Definitely different, and I'll explain in a second. I first want to put forth this, that really, if you get to my heart of hearts, what you're doing I've advocated this for decades, and that is to save in silver and gold. But it's an inert element that's preserved wealth for thousands of years, but it does nothing to help us. It helps you individually. It helps you save and mitigate the future when things keep going south. But it's just money. And money has a purpose, and that is to generate a better life for everybody. It's to build a business. It's to educate people. It's to grow food. It's to that. So it's a static thing. It doesn't really do anything except sit there. So people very seldom hear me say that part of it. But the reason I advocate it so much is somebody's got to stand on the sidelines when that fight's over and everybody leaves in despair and says, what happens? And they put up, go into the same building, and someone gets in the middle of the fight ring and says, okay, this is not about a fight anymore. It's about how do we come back from where we ended. And here's the start. And you've got the money to do that. You've got the money to reopen, and you're not going to make a dime on it, but you've saved enough to where at least you can bring the people back together and rebuild. And so that's the purpose of having it. Now, if you do what I teach, you've only taken 10% off the table into that scenario, and the other 80 or 90%, you're working within the system in any way you see fit. You're in a business that still works or doesn't. You're making a foundation to educate people on the true economic system or what have you. So I've never said, look, you sit on the sidelines the whole time with everything you've got. That's rather foolish. I think you can play both hands. You can do your best to educate and help people in the rotten system as we have it, and be one of those mavericks that stands out and speaks the truth like you are, and still have something on the side. If everything goes to hell, you've got something to fall back on, feed your family, help your neighbors, help rebuild. So I think I answered the full question, but I look at it in two ways. You've got to have the education, you've got to have the conviction, and you've got to have something on the side to rebuild.
Mm-hmm. So what are the fundamentals, the different fundamentals between silver and gold?
Yeah. So gold is to preserve wealth, and it's very established.
Yes.
And I'm not as big a gold bug as I am a silver bug, and there's several reasons. One is, since it is so establishment, even though you won't hear it on the mainstream financial press, who have been the biggest buyers of gold the last 2 years, and it's been the central banks. They know what's happening. Now, I call it, and I believe I'm very accurate in this, the money of last resort. The central banks are not going to put out another gold standard unless they absolutely have to. And if they absolutely have to, it'll probably not be a gold exchange standard where you can actually put down a digit, something off your phone, an electronic blip, and exchange it for gold, let alone a piece of paper exchange for gold. There won't be a gold exchange standard ever going forward, in my view. But to regain trust, they may have to institute gold again in the monetary system. I doubt they want to do that. I don't think they'll do it initially. The only time I think it could happen is based on a failure of their attempt to just go to a modern money theory and print until the cows don't, come home. And then, of course, the control of the digital system, where you can make it change its value. You can force people to spend all their money every month, or it's worthless. They can only spend it within a certain jurisdiction or a certain radius from their home. I mean, there's a lot you can do with the central bank digital currency that is outside the realm of freedom. And gold and silver really represent freedom, because, again, it's not anybody's liability. When I trade you an ounce of silver for your globe on the back of your desk there, We made a free exchange. You think you're getting a better deal by getting the ounce of silver, and I think I'm getting a better deal by getting the globe. And
I
that's
think
how the free market works.
I'd probably have to give you about 10 of these globes to get an ounce of silver from you, to be quite honest. Speaking of central bank buying, like we all saw Russia buy a whack of it before they entered war, right? And now we've seen China over the last 12 months, I think, be the largest buyer of gold. So what do you think they know? Because they're all buying it and thinking they know something better than the other person.
Yeah, they know history.
Yeah.
Did you have a follow-on question?
Yeah. Okay. So history is that's just the answer.
Yeah, well, I'll explain. So if you look at, so as an Austrian schooled, self-taught thinker, what we learn about capital isn't that capital, as most people think, is like money or gold and silver. It isn't money, fiat money, or real money. Capital in the Austrian school is the means of production. Because, again, money is just money. What's its purpose? It's to make the economy move.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lubrication of society. And basically, as I explained, it's really energy. But how do you, mitigate who gets the energy? By the cost, by the price, by money. Money is moving the energy. So that's the basis. And you got to go from there. And this is what will actually mitigate a lot of problems. But I've kind of lost my train of thought. Why don't you bring me back in? What was the question?
The question is like, what does China know?
Oh, yeah. So they know the history. And the history is this: the means of production keeps the most gold. So if you follow history, what you find is when you could look at the Roman Empire, but let's just start in modern days. You look at the UK, the United Kingdom, the empire, the sun never, shine on the empire the whole time. Forget the exact wording. And they had the means of production through colonialism. They didn't produce it in the UK, but they produced it as the UK's dominance across the planet. They had the most gold. Now, what happened after World War I? You go into World War II, and what happens? The means of production is the United States. And where's the gold flow to? It flows to the United States. And who's become the means of production for the world for the last decade or more? China. And where's all the gold flow to? China. So if you follow the money, remember, we hear that all the time, but I just followed the money for you in a macro picture, not in a micro picture. So that's it. That's the answer. You go from the means of production, most gold, the next means of production, most gold, the means of production, most gold. So follow the money. It goes from the producer, the UK, to the producer, United States, to the producer, China. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's
really you do make it sound so simple, David. Why do you think silver and gold are struggling so much? Like when we look at silver and gold in other currencies, right? They're all kind of kissing all-time highs. And yet there seems to be a lag in the North American market. And actually, going back to central bank buying, all the central bank buying in the last year too is not from Canada or the US. They're from the Middle East and from emerging nations, which I think is also, what do these people know that the US and Canada are not buying into?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that in other currencies, because let's examine that first and then come back to why we have a price in the US that's so different. So when you think about it, and really you made a statement that maybe you don't really understand. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to pick on you. I just want to think together, have a conversation. Why are these countries willing to buy gold at an all-time high? Over and over and over
again.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
They know something.
That's what you said. That's true, but I just haven't voiced that in an interview before. It really didn't occur to me to emphasize that point, but you brought it to my attention. So thank you. So now let's look at the US. Well, why? Well, because the United States dollar is still the dominant currency, and the masters of the universe, the money men, the money masters, I'll call them, that are globalists. They have no nationalism. They have no ethics. They have a control freak mentality. It's more about control than money at this point, but money is still the main control mechanism. So that's where their motivation is. So they have to control the dollar. So how do you control the dollar? Well, to keep the suckers in the game, you make something that's losing value look more valuable. How do you do that? You raise interest rates. So when the zero interest rate policy was implemented and went for so long, really, if you use an intellectual exercise and you think about, well, if it's zero interest, then how valuable is it? It's really worth nothing.
Nothing. Not for yield, that's for sure.
But now it's worth 5% or 4.8 or whatever the 10-year is today.
Yeah.
But that's how you keep the suckers in the game, is you promise them a yield. And this is something that's, the highest yield for, many, many years. But it can only go so long. So the answer is they're going to keep the dollar as strong as possible. I would say, is the Federal Reserve in this case. I don't think the BRICS want that. That's why they keep buying gold at a high price. So you can look at all those countries. So you got a division that's already taking place. Then I don't want to talk about it now. We can, but you also got a somewhat of a mitigation on an individual basis, and that would be the cryptocurrency world. And you are starting to see more and more institutions come into it. In fact, I really didn't get involved on the crypto scene for my readers until Wall Street got involved. And I wrote in the report. We've been following the blockchain, and we do a blockchain brief in every mortgage report. But I'm just kind of following the idea of it. But we put investment in it when Wall Street got involved. I said, look, this is a no-lose situation. When Wall Street starts touting it and you catch it early, you ride their tails. So we did. And we made some pretty good, returns on Ethereum, and XRP's kind of holding. And we had a couple other ones. One I sold out and broke even on it, but we've done pretty well. And not that anyone but study my work knows that, but I am for the blockchain. I think there are uses for it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's, before we wrap this up here, you talked about using physical for 10% for wealth preservation, but use the rest of your capital, whether it's cash or whatever, to, try to build your wealth in the meantime. What are you suggesting? Not that this is any investment advice here. What's the theory behind to your readers of like what percentage you put in cash or stocks or ETFs, outside of that 10%?
Yeah, I don't talk about that too often because I specialize in the resource sector, but I did recommend ADM.
Okay.
When I saw the food crisis, way before most of us, you can check the record. You could go back and see when I started talking about a food crisis, probably a year and a half before anyone else. So I said ADM was one. So a lot of my followers. Oil, I like it. A lot of big oil companies are borrowing money to pay a dividend. Wait a minute. What does that mean? All these oil companies are making all this money. Well, if you look at a balance sheet, they're really not in a lot of cases. But I like energy. I don't like the green energy. I wrote a study of a study. It was a 2-year study on if we went all electric. If we went all electric, you'd have to mine lithium for something like 500 years in order to go all. It's just the numbers are astronomically absurd. So obviously I put that out to my, my paid subscribers. But land is always a good one if you get it at the right price. A business is the best if you're an entrepreneur, but you got to suffer through it. And remember, 99% of startups fail. So going into business always sounds great, but it's not for everybody. But it is that. And I defer to others. I say, if you want a more diversification, get a different newsletter. I specialize in the resource sector. I've, made money in moly. I've made money in cobalt. I've made money in lithium. I made money in copper. I made money in some unique asymmetric trades. We do have some crypto. We like uranium. So there's lots in the resource sector that I specialize in. We've got a lithium situation that I like that's going out to our paid subscribers. But as far as get into energy, get into food, get into real things, I'm pretty much a generalist, and I just feel they're paying me for my expertise, not for my overall.
Yeah.
But I know some of these people are pretty wealthy and they've got like a financial planner, and they use them for maybe 80% of their portfolio, and the other 20% they follow my recommendation.
So speaking of stocks, and Do you mind sharing some of your top picks?
No,
Or
I don't mind.
yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, first of all, I put out on my Twitter feed a bar graph of how well the Morgan Report has done. And it's probably done better than almost anybody in, the gold newsletter business. And I'm more than a gold newsletter. I do all the resources that I outline. But this success came from a failure. When I was very young, I decided that I'd get rich quick, and all I had to do was buy the best penny stocks on gold, and I'd instantly become independently wealthy and have a couple Corvettes, and life would be great. But that's not what happened.
It never does. Life never turns out how we plan it in our head. That's for sure.
That's right.
The moment you do, God says no.
So what I learned was the hard way that you put big money into big companies. So if you take one of my favorites, my biggest holdings, Franco-Nevada.
Okay.
And if you look at Franco-Nevada versus gold, because there's a lot of people out there, some are very good friends of mine, that'll tell you don't buy gold stocks because gold bullion outperforms. And in the aggregate, that's true. But in the specifics, it's false. And I'll prove it right now. When gold was at $2,000 an ounce in September 2011, Franco-Nevada was 1/3 the price it is right now. So if you put the $2,000 in the gold at the top, it's worth $2,000 today, 12 years later. But if you put that $2,000 in the Franco-Nevada, it's worth $6,000 today. That's like gold going to $6,000. And it hasn't.
It hasn't.
So that gold stock outperformed gold significantly.
Yeah.
Now it's not a pure going up, but if you look at the long-term chart.
Yeah. So does your letter focus on the bigger cap names then?
Absolutely. I learned if I was going to buy nothing but penny stocks, I'd go broke.
You'd be doomed.
And I didn't want to go broke. I wanted those 2 Corvettes. I wanted a big bank account. I wanted to buy my house for cash. I wanted to do the things I've done later in life, and I paid the price to get here.
Yeah. Oh, we do, right? I don't
mind saying that, but I didn't want. First of all, I was going to do 0 penny stocks. And I started out with that philosophy. But when I got to writing the report, there were so few available. I used logic. Wait a minute. There's only like 10 stocks down here, and these guys sold their second home and their boat and their 3rd car. And they put their kids through a state college instead of a private school for one reason. They held their property because they knew how much value it had. So all I had to do was cherry pick those few, and I looked like a genius. I picked more penny stocks that became mine than anybody else, and I'm not a geologist. How does that happen? Pure logic. I said, if these guys are willing to give up so much of their extra money, I'll call it, and sell that second home, sell the vacation home to hold their project, it's got to be worth something.
That's an excellent place to end, David. I certainly appreciate your time. I can't wait to talk to you down the road too, because I think we could talk for hours about this stuff. And so yeah, all the listeners out there, be sure to check out the Morgan Report. We'll put the link at the bottom. And if you enjoyed this interview, be sure to join the Kinvestor Network, subscribe to our channel, comment on our videos below, and share them with like-minded investors. And until next time.
Very good. Thank you.